Yeah, so there are so many different perspectives and beliefs about when it comes to the spirit, right? So just to have a basic understanding, what's the Islamic perspective about the spirit, Rooh?
Allah answers this question in Surah Al-Isra as the people of Quraysh came to the Prophet ﷺ and they asked him, tell us about Rooh, about this spirit or the soul. What is this thing? If you truly from Allah, from God, and to tell us what that really is. And the Prophet ﷺ asked Allah to tell him what the answer is. So the way Allah responded was by saying, وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الرُّوحِ قُلِ الرُّوحُ مِنْ أَمْرِ رَبِّي وَمَا أُوتِيتُم مِنَ الْعِلْمِ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا. They ask you about the soul, about the spirit. Well, tell them, this is a matter that Allah or God kept to Himself. And what you have been given of the knowledge is very little. So Allah kept the knowledge of the ruh or the soul to Himself. But Allah told us in the Revelation, in His book and in the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, some aspects about the soul that we need in order to be able to navigate this life. Not necessarily telling us what the soul is. We know it's a non-physical entity, and we know it's the essence of humans. It's the essence of who we call I or me. That's the reality of a human being. It's the soul. The body is mainly a vehicle. So it's the essence of human beings. But what is the soul made of? What is its nature as in terms of like physically describing it, its element? We don't know exactly, but there are certain clues in the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ that actually shed some light and tell us something mainly from a functional perspective about the soul, rather than about what is the soul made of.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's fine, right? Like getting into what the soul actually is one thing, right? But what I remember from the course that I attended with you is that we have self, right? And then we have this Rooh or spirit. And then we have heart. That's how you used to draw, right?
Yeah.
So ultimately, we are actually going to talk about how do we reach that level of azima and contentment and human excellence or ihsan. But again, to base that conversation somewhere, how do these different elements influence each other?
I see.
In a simple words.
So again, there are these different elements to who we are, and as we stated previously, in most cultures, these words are used interchangeably for most of the time. But and I would say one of the words that is used most elusively, most fluid, in the most fluid nature of a word is the word self or nafs in the Arabic language. And so sometimes it's used to refer to the ego, which is our base desires and the negative part of who we are. And sometimes it's used to refer to the heart itself or the person as a person. And sometimes the word self or nafs is actually also used to refer to the ruh, which is the spirit. And this is one of the sources of confusion. And somebody might suggest, look, okay, why don't we just call a spade a spade? Just use self in the most limited, constricted sense of the word, so we don't get it confused with other things. But the thing is, even the self has a lot to do with the ruh and the soul, and this is why it's used interchangeably. So this is not a random kind of fluid use of the language. It actually refers to a fact. So we can't just change a universal fact for the sake of convenient cognitive approach to things. So we have, but for learning reasons, we could actually do that temporarily, but not to use it in a general sense. We can refer to these three basic elements that usually pop up, and we can identify them. And in this context now, we're going to speak about them in the most constricted sense. So we will not use the words loosely. So when we talk about the self here, the first thing, the self basically is, we're talking about our physical composition, our cognitive mental composition, which is how we think, our logical thinking, our rational mind, and our immediate experience, which relates to this world. And On the other side, we have our very essence, which is non-physical. It's non-form. That's the soul. That's the spirit. It's part of the unseen world. No one has ever seen their own soul. No one has ever touched it or smelled it, or even, we don't know how it looks like. And we don't even know how it smells. So that's part of the unseen world, but we just know it because that's who we are. We know it exists. We feel it exists. We feel that's who we are. But, and that's it. So this would be the second element. And usually it is this ruh, it is this spirit or the soul that we believe where the fitrah comes from. And the fitrah, as the Prophet ﷺ referred to it, and it's also, there's a reference to it in the Quran, it's basically the innate nature of humans, which we believe in Islam is actually good. So we are moral, we know God in an intuitive sense, at that level of the soul. We love God and we seek Him. So we are good in that sense. We believe this fitrah comes from our spiritual nature, from our ruh. And then we have the heart. And the heart basically is what we're working with in this life. So our hearts come sort of, in a sense, they come empty. And what we do with the heart in this world, either it gets more influenced by the lower part of the self or the base part of the self, which is the ego. And if the ego colors the heart more, then the heart goes down and takes the attributes and the traits of the self, so it becomes bad. And that's going against the word of God, against the instructions of the Prophet ﷺ. Whereas if a person colors their heart with the content or the element of the soul, of the fitrah, of the good stuff, the moral stuff, then the heart would grow. And that's what we believe to be self-development, true self-development, spiritual growth. This is what we believe religiosity is actually about.
Exactly.
So these are the three elements in very basic terms and how they relate to each other.
This is great.